welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video, and I'm going to do some more Dungeons & Dragons food. I'm going to cook something that we would often have to rely on in our campaign way back in the day. Now, I've already done videos about iron rations, what that might have been, a couple of variations on that theme. Standard rations are obvious, you know, a leg of mutton and a hunk of cheese or whatever. Then I also talked about how sometimes our DM would joke that the iron rations consisted of salted fish, whatever that is, so I've tried that. But it occurred to me there's actually one last bit of Dungeons & Dragons food that we would survive on in absolutely dire circumstances. Now, we're talking all of your rations have run out, you got nothing left in your backpack, you are in some area where there aren't even any deer you can hunt. There's nothing. You've got nothing to live on. No berries, no nothing. You can't forage a thing. He would joke about, well, in that case, I guess you could always rely on some pine needle soup. So that's what we're going to make. Some pine needle soup. This is going to be kind of interesting. I've had to do quite a lot of research on this because I thought to myself, well, I'm surely not the first person who's ever done this. What's involved in getting pine needle soup going? Do you just stick these in the water? How does this work? I've got my little travel pot that we would use out in the adventure. But as it turns out, it's not so simple, and this is something I do not recommend you try this at home. Much like the time I was eating dog food, do your research in advance, okay? And here's why. First of all, there was a really good several YouTube channels that I watched. Anytime I did a search for pine needle soup, the results that came back were pine needle tea, not soup. That's apparently a well-known thing, pine needle tea, and various survivalist groups did it. Erin Made in Japan, I did a video about one of her hard times videos way back in the day. She actually also did one on pine needle tea. So this is a thing. It's well known that some people actually survived on this. However, I want to put a shout out to a YouTube channel called The Outsider, because he actually did a very full how you would boil up some white pine and what you would, like how you'd want to extract it and that kind of stuff. He also did a video saying, be really careful. There are varieties of pine that you are not supposed to eat. There are some that are poisonous. There are a large number of them that you really want to do your research, and I have done so with this. So, do not try this at home until you've looked up things. Also, I asked a friend of mine who lives near some pine trees. I was like, hey, you mind if we come over and hack off a branch? And she said, okay, wait, do not eat any pine that is from a tree that's in like a well-known community, like a park or something like that, because they will spray for pesticides. You don't want to be drinking that. And secondly, don't take it from like anywhere near a highway or anywhere there's likely to be pollution or cars going by, because again, the tree's going to absorb that, and you don't want that in your system. What we got here is some Douglas fir from my brother-in-law's house because he has a bunch of different trees, and I thought, okay, let's snip off from all these different varieties and see which one fits the bill according to the Outsider. This one, Douglas fir, passes. I'll put a link below to the Outsider's actual channel where he goes into the details of what kind of leaves or needles you want to be drinking and what you don't want to be drinking. So, now that this has passed the bill and I've given my public service announcement, what we're going to do is, this is going to be a very simple recipe. I'm just going to boil some water. I'm going to put some of the needles, not the whole branch, but I'm going to put some of the needles in there, boil it up for 20 minutes, and then, now I had to ask you a question, does that make it a tea or does that make it a soup? What's the difference? Because it was soup that we referred to in the game, but all I can find is pine needle tea, and is that the same recipe? If I put needles in here in hot water, does that make it a soup, or does that make it a tea? And my aunt, who is a professional chef, actually said, you know what? If you are to steep something in water, and then you extract it, you filter it out or whatever, that kind of makes it a tea. There are some teas where you leave the leaves in, but, you know, for that argument's sake, that would be that. And if you're eating it with those items inside, that makes it a soup. So I'm not actually going to put a lot of these needles in my mouth. I might chew on one just to give you an idea, but I am going to at least steep it in the water and see what it tastes like. So, let's give it a try. I gave the branch a little rinse under the tap just now because there were a couple spiders in there, so you want to make sure you don't have any visitors before you put it into your soup. Okay, water's boiling. Let's turn it down. I guess I want about a medium boil on there. And here are my needles that I'm going to be putting in. I was thinking of maybe just bashing them a bit, maybe loosen them up like a mortar and pestle idea, but then they started flying everywhere. You can see some landed on the table. So just going to pour them straight in and see what we get here. This is going to be tricky to do while filming. Hang on. Let's get there and... oh, there we go. Not so bad. Alright, so most recipes seem to say about 15 to 20 minutes of boiling in here. So I'm going to do that and I will report back. Well, that's been about 20 minutes, so let's turn the heat off and we're going to just see what this thing is like. I'm going to... now, what I'll do, yeah, it doesn't look that much different. I'm going to put it in this fairly white bowl here, but what I will do is strain those needles. So I got a strainer there, and let's give this a try. I'm just going to do a few good big spoonfuls. And my objective is to maybe munch on a couple of those needles, but I don't want them in the soup itself because these things are probably pretty hard. Yeah, look at that. All right. And I don't know if they're all that fit for human consumption. We'll soon find out. Okay, so that's a pretty good helping of the soup. Now, I'll just set this guy over here. Oh, one or two needles got in. All right, that's not so bad. Well, it doesn't have much of a color to it. Huh. All right, well, let's drink up. All right, let's try out pine needle soup or tea. I'll be very curious. I mentioned before Emmy made in Japan. She had this and she described it as drinking 2x4. So I'm thinking this will be very woody. But then having said that, The Outsider did mention that this was the Douglas fir. Of the 4 types he and his wife tried, the Douglas fir was actually his second favorite, and he described it as very flowery. So let's find out what this is like. Yeah, it is not unpleasant, but it's, you know, it does have a bit of a flavor. It's not that terrible. I mean, again, we're talking survival, whatever you can rip off the trees, and in this case, the Douglas fir, boil it in your travel pot, and then away you go. You know, you found some of whatever's available in the wilderness. And so for something you don't really have a lot of choice about, that's actually okay. There we go. Yeah, I think you could manage on that. What does it taste similar to? I was expecting like a shot of pine sol, but it's not like that. It's like a very refined, thin, consumable version of that. There is a pine flavor to it, but not in a bad way, in a nice soupy way, or tea, depending on your definition. I was very intrigued. Another bit of footage I was researching before making this video, can't remember the guy's name, but his video was how not to make pine needle tea. And I thought, okay, what are the pitfalls and things that are dangerous? In his case, he was on a beach and he kept slipping through rocks and couldn't get the water very well, and then he overboiled it, and it was more of just his awkwardness. But what I thought was funny is the minute the stuff touched his lips, he spat it out. He was like, "That's vile." And I thought, okay, am I going for that experience? Is it going to be really gross? Or is it like Emmymade in Japan, where it's like drinking a 2x4? I would say it leans a little more toward what Emmy reported. It's like drinking a 2x4. Now, I just happen to have one needle down here. So I'm going to scoop that. I don't know if you can make that out, but that is in my spoon. I'm not going to swallow it, but I want to roll around in my teeth and just see, is it softened enough? Can you Like, is it kind of like a noodle of some description if you were in that situation where this is the only thing you've had to eat for several days? What is this like? So there's a needle. It is very soft. It is very soft. Like a blade of grass, almost. You know, if you've ever accidentally had grass in your mouth from like falling down or something like that, it's got that kind of consistency. Don't think I would recommend actually swallowing this because it's a bit large for the esophagus. It might get stuck in there, so I'm going to leave that to the side. But again, our dungeon travelers do not realize that. They're just drinking or eating whatever they can. So for them, I don't think that would be very filling. Neither would this soup. It's just hot water that's got a flavor, but it's not a bad flavor. So there we go. I have finally had pine needle soup. I'm going to call it a soup. It's probably technically more of a tea. There's no stock to it or anything. It's just some pine needles that have been boiled in water, but I like it. I think this would go very well with, well, snow, whatever you have around you in your dire traveling situation. All right, well, there we go. Pine needle soup. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.